This is Brent coming at you with yet another overhead squat assessment video. In this video, we're going to go over the excessive forward lean, a very, very common sign, which I'm sure you've all seen before. I'm going to have my friend Leanne step out. Leanne's going to help us demonstrate an excessive forward lean. The first things you're going to notice is that Leanne actually steps so we can see sideways, right? This is one of those signs we see from a lateral view. I'm still going to set her up the same way, second toe pointing forward, her feet underneath her hips, and her arms are up over her head. All right, and then when she does that, I'm going to go ahead and have her squat. Now, an excessive forward lean is based on the tibia-torso angle. Her tibia and torso should line up parallel to one another. Now, to help you guys visualize, I'm going to go ahead and line these dowels up. So there's her tibia angle. There's her torso angle. And as you guys can see, those two lines meet. So by definition, they're not parallel, and Leanne has a excessive forward lean. So a very, very common impairment I think you guys are going to see often. Thank you, Leanne, for demonstrating.
Welcome, Brett.
Sometimes you guys will see something far worse than that where people almost look like they're pancaking over. And sometimes it won't be that bad, and maybe you are going to have to break out a couple dowels or broomsticks or whatever you guys got at your club to kind of help you see whether that excessive forward lean is coming out. Now, this isn't a terribly hard dysfunction to start correcting. It's not a terribly hard dysfunction to analyze as soon as you know what's driving it. Now, I know most of you guys are probably thinking excessive forward lean, well, that's excessive hip flexion. But we actually have to take one more step back from that. What's actually driving that hip flexion is the inability of my knees to track forward. Now, the inability of my knees to track forward is a lack of dorsiflexion. So the same joint action that causes my feet to come up, all right, is the joint action that allows my tibias to come this way. So dorsiflexion, foot on tibia, dorsiflexion, tibia on foot. Since I can't track my knees forward, here's what happens. I can't track my knees forward, which means as I squat, my backside gets further and further behind me, which is where my center of mass is located, right, my core. Once it goes past my base of support, I end up having to throw all of my upper body mass forward to maintain balance over my feet. So that's what's actually driving this dysfunction, is that lack of dorsiflexion, which then causes the excessive hip flexion. Now, a lack of dorsiflexion is the same thing as excessive plantar flexion for our analysis purposes. So, now we're right back to the same 5 steps that we've been going through on every video. Excessive forward lean equals excessive hip flexion and excessive plantar flexion. You guys know your hip flexors: TFL, psoas and iliacus, rectus femoris, adductors. You're going to release these muscles, save the psoas. We don't want to try self-administered release techniques on the psoas, but we'll release all of our other hip flexors, then we'll start doing our hip flexor stretches. Plantar flexors, you guys know your plantar flexors. Your plantar flexors are your calves. Make sure you stretch calves in these individuals, right? You want to release and stretch. You see an excessive forward lean, first thing you want to put them on is softball on those calves, as well as maybe a slant board. As far as what's underactive, this gets a little tricky. We're going back to some of this synergistic dominance. You guys probably have heard this phrase before, this idea before. In excessive forward lean, you have hip extensors as long and underactive. They're on this side of the graph. But once you get past the glutes and the semis, you end up with 2 muscles that take on this weird relationship. They become long, but they get overactive. What that means is you can release these muscles for their overactivity, but you don't want to stretch them. Just because they're overactive, you don't want to just go ahead and stretch and lengthen them. Because they're overactive, you also don't want to activate them. If you guys get somebody in an excessive forward lean, the big muscle to think about is actually the glute max. So you guys can kind of forget the other muscles that'll extend the hip if you're trying to correct this dysfunction, and keep going after the glute max with your isolated activation techniques. Dorsiflexion, of course, is a huge important thing to gain back. You guys are going to want to continue to go after the tibialis anterior, and if you don't know some good tibialis anterior activation by now, I would definitely recommend you guys looking up those videos, putting them in your repertoire, because you can definitely correct a lot of these lower leg dysfunction problems by learning how to get this guy going. I hope you guys learned a lot from this video. I hope you guys understand excessive forward lean and get great outcomes. Thank you.